Hey everyone, it's Joe Waxman here. This morning, I want to look at the chart of boxer Muhammad Ali. I'm going to share my screen. So, he was before my time. I don't really have, that much personal experience with him. I watched some boxing videos online and read his Wikipedia, and excellent boxer. Very interesting character on multiple levels. So let's look at that. He's got his sun in Capricorn in the sixth house, and it is his ascendant lord. So he's going right in the sixth house of competition. It's fully in the sixth house because it's within the sixth house quadrant and the sixth whole sign house. So very much into competition, fighting, quarrels, things of that nature. Boxing, obviously. Capricorn is very fitting, I think, for this because it's very earthy and grounded. His sun is it has a trine to Uranus and Saturn, and that's quite good. It's a little bit wide with Saturn, but it is it's still there and still helps. Saturn ruling Capricorn helps the sun, the dignity of the sun. Ascendant Lord and Saturn, Leo. That's very obvious with his whole persona. I mean, he was known as the greatest, probably because he called himself the greatest a lot. And I think a lot of people would agree that he was the greatest boxer of all time, one of the greatest athletes of all time. So, that's very prominent. He's got Moon, Mercury, and Venus in the seventh house in Aquarius. And this is, he was very provocative. He talked a lot. He was vocal. He boasted a lot. And I don't know, how he compared to other athletes. I think that was relatively new, really being like a big mouth about, who he was, who he is, all that talk, that kind of cockiness. And I'm not judging him. It just is what it is. He was very vocal about it. That's obviously Mercury especially, but Moon and Venus also. Moon and Mercury are tightly conjunct, so his heart, his emotions, his feelings are easily expressed because of Mercury. And Venus also, because Venus is joy. It's our pleasure. It's what we like to do. Venus in the seventh house is also going to be very flirtatious and have lots of involvement with, especially if it's a man, the opposite sex, and he slept around a lot, apparently. Venus has a really, it's square Saturn, but it has a mutual reception with Saturn, a really strong one, because they're 1 degree apart, square. Venus is ruling Taurus, Saturn is ruling Aquarius, so it's a mutual reception by a square. And Saturn likes Venus. Saturn is exalted, and Venus is the sign of Libra. So these are trading places, 7th and 10th house. So that, that's strengthening both these planets and giving a lot of bonification to his career and to his interaction with others. The 7th house also deals with the sort of dealing with opponents. 6th house is the house of competition and fighting and whatnot, but Seventh house can also have a relationship with that because it is opposition to the ascendant. So it's still dealing with that relational aspect. Some people say it's the house of open enemies. So boxing would still have a correlation to the seventh house. Sixth, seventh, and eighth are really the three houses of others. So even in the eighth house, we can see some relation to that competitive one-on-one fighting nature. Eighth house is a more intimate house, more secret house, house of shared resources, crises, that sort of thing, death, rebirth. But South Node is here, and it is Pisces, ruled by Jupiter. And South Node indicates his childhood, his upbringing. And so I think there was a lot of, it just made him very deep and serious as a young man. And we can see that reflected. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that, but I think that was part of it. It just drove him very deep into himself, because Pisces is also a water sign, and eighth house is originally a water house. Right. If we look up here at his 10th house, it's very strong, very prominent. We got Mars in Taurus, Saturn and Uranus in Taurus, all in the, well, technically Mars is in the 9th quadrant, but it's in the 10th whole sign house. And then Jupiter is still technically in the 10th quadrant, but 11th whole sign house, in detriment in Mercury. So there's a lot going on here. First of all, he did, as a young man, convert to Islam, and his original name was Cassius Clay, but he changed it to Muhammad Ali. We can see that because Mars is ruling the 9th house cusp, it's moving into the 10th whole sign house. So religion is becoming a very public for him. That's not the changing part. The changing part is actually, here we see Pluto in Leo square Mars in Taurus. And this has a lot to do with his fighting nature. First of all, Mars is in detriment in Taurus, but it is a triplicity ruler. So it's interesting. Mars in Taurus. Mars in Taurus is often a combination for fighters, and it's a very irritable Mars. It's an angry Mars. Mars in Taurus will either avoid confrontation or be overly confrontational, one or the other. And I've seen both. I've seen this play out both ways. Not everyone who has Mars in Taurus is a fighter. Sometimes they really just go out of their way to avoid confrontation. But definitely it's either way, they have a grumpy attitude often. Like if anything rubs them the wrong way, they can just be very irritable, grumpy. But his Mars is square Pluto in Leo. So Pluto in Leo is a very, that's going to really bring a lot of power and development towards the ego. You know, this is, as always, the boomer generation, and the boomers are very, their sense of ego, their sense of individuality is very well developed because of this. You know, Pluto in Leo really brings out that Leo quality. It develops it, especially over time, because Pluto really works that Leo energy, really develops it, you know, through hardships, pain, crisis. But the square to Mars, where these are both the co-rulers of Scorpio, but the square between them it's an intense square. It creates a lot of fights. These are competitive fighters, and it's both angular. I mean, this, you could argue that it's in the 12th house, 12th quadrant, but it's still in the same sign as the ascendant, right? And the ascendant lord is in the 6th house in Capricorn. So this is a very fighting aspect. Mars, I want to say it's definitely in the ninth quadrant, but it's because it's close enough to the MC, it's very strongly influencing the MC and 10th house. And same thing with Pluto in Leo, less so to the ascendant, Pluto to the ascendant, more so because the degree wise, you always look at it. So this is 9 degrees to the MC, and this is 15 degrees. But still, that square is very intense, and he's a fighter, right? No doubt about that. Very strong fighting ability. Not only that, I want to point out some other quality that he has, which is pretty interesting. Saturn's retrograde, Uranus is retrograde, Jupiter's retrograde, Pluto's retrograde, Chiron's retrograde. The nodes are always retrograde, but Neptune's retrograde, Venus is retrograde, okay? He has an abundance of retrograde planets. And what do retrograde planets do? They don't move forward, is what they do. Not only that, some of these are retrograde in fixed signs. So fixed retrogrades are going to be the most stubborn, especially in Taurus. But any fixed sign, but Taurus, really, because it's fixed Earth. Taurus is the most stubborn. So planets that are retrograde in fixed signs, but especially Taurus, are just, you will not, they're like rocks. They're just they're gonna hold their ground. They're not gonna want to move forward. So put that into perspective with not only his fighting ability, just this rock, this bull, this stubborn bull, right? But also his resistance to the draft. I'm sure a lot of you know that he was drafted and he resisted the draft. And it was a long drawn out battle for him, but he won eventually. And he did box again. He had to stop his career because he got his license revoked after avoiding the draft. But that you can see a lot with the retrograde planets, this Mars, MC, and Saturn and Uranus, all in Taurus. Saturn, Uranus retrograde, and then Pluto square Mars, Pluto retrograde. Chiron retrograde, it's lesser extent because it's not a big planet, but still effective. And those are really, really stubborn aspects. And then even Venus retrograde, right? In Aquarius. Venus rules Taurus, so it's not a lightweight. I mean, it is a more feminine planet, but it does have this very grounded earthy quality, Venus. And it's in a fixed sign, retrograde. So there's a lot of stubbornness going on here. A lot of fixed fixed, turning back, turning inward, becoming reflective. Yeah. Oh, I forgot the whole thing. Okay, so why did he change religions? Well, Pluto transforms whatever it aspects. So it's aspecting the ascendant to some degree, but also Mars, which is ruling the 9th house of religion, right? So this Pluto is changing his Mars, changing his religion. Also, all the retrogrades are having him look inward, reflecting, and his Mars, oddly enough, is not retrograde, but all the other planets are. Jupiter, which definitely rules faith, religion, philosophy, is retrograde. It's in Gemini, and Gemini is very mutable, very changeable, right? Jupiter is ruling the 8th house and the 5th house. So that's, not related, but it's also Jupiter in Gemini is opposite its own rulership, so it's in detriment. I relate that to that early on, he was very, he had an immature, he was angry and his philosophy was not very evolved early on. He belonged to more militant aggressive. I don't want to say, I don't even know. It was very anti-white, typically, I don't want to say racist, but racial. He was racially motivated early on. Later, he became more balanced and more inclusive, and didn't want to belong to like radical ideologies. He was for peace. He condemned the Islamic violence of terrorists at 9/11. So that developed, and how you can see that is that Jupiter is in its own term. You can't see the dignities here because it's on a separate page and it won't share it. But Jupiter, although is in Gemini, is in Jupiter's term. It's called terms or bounds. So this is giving Jupiter some dignity. And that is, that's why. So you could see it like early on, he was more like racially motivated. He said white people are his enemy, which is not a very evolved, but you can see if he was, I'm not judging him because there was a lot of mistreatment towards, Black people, and there still is. There's a lot of inequality. But a more evolved view has to include everyone because we all live together here on this planet and we need to get along and have peace with each other. So eventually he did come around to the much bigger view. So that's the Jupiter in detriment, but the term is ruled by Jupiter. So that's why one of the reasons why he could embrace a more inclusive view. And Jupiter is conjuncting by 6 degrees, the 5 degrees, the 11th house cusp. So it's making a very idealistic Jupiter, hopes, wishes, dreams, thinking big. So although Jupiter is still in detriment, it's becoming part of his bigger mentality, right? Groups, networks, hopes, wishes, dreams. The 11th house is very idealistic placement for houses. Okay. He was dyslexic. He had trouble reading and writing. And let's see here. Jupiter's trine there. That could be Jupiter in Gemini. No, I don't think so. I think it's Mercury. So it's widely square, these planets. It's applying to a square to Saturn, even though it's still wide, along with the moon. So that might have something to do with it. But probably more so is Chiron opposite Moon and Mercury, and Chiron conjunct the ascendant, influenced by Pluto as well. I think that's probably why he had a bit of a learning disability or dyslexia. He did go on after his boxing career to some credit him with being the original rapper because he made albums, spoken word, which is interesting because North Node in the second house of voice, speaking, disposited by Mercury in the 7th house. So very vocal despite, dyslexia. I mean, that's just a hindrance, but it did not stop him. He did the spoken word thing, and Neptune is also in Virgo at the 29th degree, but North Node still making a wide connection there. So creativity with the voice. So that's prominent. It's Muhammad Ali. In Chiron also being conjunct the ascendant, he definitely identified as an outsider, as somebody who's different, unique, not quite normal. And also with the MC, there is this square, this big T square with Chiron, Moon, Mercury, MC. So this is squaring the public. His public image was very tense, obviously. there were a lot of issues around his public image. He did make enemies easily. That's not that is partially because he's got 3 malefics in Taurus in the 10th house, Mars, Saturn, Uranus, because he was so boastful. Some people didn't like that. I saw a short clip of Jerry Lewis, and I did Jerry Lewis's chart. Jerry Lewis is like, talk about ego. I mean, not that he wasn't, also, I mean, they're, it's like, a rock and a hard plate. Well, I mean, 2, butting heads. He was boasting, and Jerry Lewis was like, I think you're full of hot air. And Jerry Lewis has like exalted Mars in the 7th house, right? So he's not going to back down either. Anyway, a lot of people did not support his decision to avoid the draft, and he didn't care. Or maybe he did care, but it's in his nature to fight. So, but his public image did suffer, but he also gained a lot of support. And Jupiter ruling the 8th house and the 11th house. So he's bringing shared resources. Shared resources. That means the resources involving other people into groups, community, networking. Like I said, it's not, Jupiter's not dignified here, but it does have some dignity with the term being ruled by Jupiter. So yeah. And then Venus, once again, Venus and Saturn in mutual reception, that is very strong. But I want to look at the Draconic Chart as I usually do, because that's very telling. We learn a lot from that. First thing to notice, Sun in Leo, right above Chiron, but conjuncting the ascendant. And this gives this shines a lot more light on his personality, why he was the way he was, why he was always boasting and being, I'm the greatest, not that he wasn't, but it takes, the two are not necessarily, they don't necessarily go together. He could have been a great boxer and been humble about it. But look, I mean, Sun in Leo conjunct the ascendant, that's huge. Sun rules Leo, and the ascendant is the 1st house. It's like the self, it's very, very prominent with somebody with Sun on the ascendant. With so much confidence. If it's in natally, even more so. But if it's draconically, that person feels it, and other people don't see it, but he's going to express it, especially with Sun in Leo, and he's got strong 7th house planets. He's going to be like, I feel like the greatest, so I am the greatest. You know what I mean? And Moon in Leo, Mercury in Leo. I mean, come on. Huge for his ego, for boosting his ego, right? Moon in Leo too, so proud. So so much pride and confidence and egotism. His ego is very well developed. Pluto, Chiron, not so much, but it shows that he was an outsider and he just felt very different from other people, especially with his draconic sun over his Chiron. Shows that he, as egotistical and proud as he also felt like he was just like different and potentially wounded on the inside. Venus is in Virgo, and that's debilitation of Venus. So part of him did not feel good about himself. So even though he had so much ego, there was a part of him that was really, because when a planet is in debilitation, then it's like really negative. It has a negative quality. Venus is joy, beauty, creativity, more prominent for women usually, but still for a man, this would show that he wasn't having fun. It was part of him that was not having a lot of fun, not enjoying himself. So adding to his sort of, I don't want to say negative, but it was kind of negative in a way. There was a negativity to him. I'm not judging him. I'm not putting him down, but this Venus and Virgo in his Draconic chart would point to that. Mars again. Mars here is in domicile in Scorpio. That's really prominent, right? It is in the fourth house, and that's not such a great position for his Mars, but nonetheless, I mean, in his natal, it's in the 9th, 10th, and Draconic. It's so both his Marses are in here. It's considered accidental dignity. Mars in the 10th, it has incredible accidental dignity, means tons of strength. So both his Marses are strong, but have some weakness as well. Here by in the house, the fourth house, not a good house, because you don't want like too much energy at home, because like it's like a bull in a china shop, just too much, right? Saturn, Uranus, and then Jupiter and Sagittarius, right? Jupiter, Mercury, Jupiter, and Sag in his Draconic chart. So underneath that debilitated Jupiter, there was this very dignified Jupiter in his Draconic chart. So he was that religion, that faith, the optimism, the connection to God. It's there. It's just hidden underneath. And like I said, this Jupiter was also had the term. It's considered the term or bound of Jupiter, so that gives it dignity as well. So he was, the religion was there. It's just he had to work through some negativity or some small-mindedness. Jupiter and Gemini can be a bit small-minded. However, I gotta say, watching in box, I definitely get the Jupiter and Gemini, because Gemini is skills of the hands. If you watch him box, like his arms are just everywhere. They're like everywhere at once, and that's a Gemini trait, being everywhere at once. And Jupiter is a very physical planet. It's physical. We often think of Mars as being physical, but Jupiter can be physical. It has the mental, philosophical, high-mindedness, but Jupiter can still be physical. So this Jupiter and Gemini, skills of the hands, I think that's very prominent. He is the way when his fists are flailing, it's just amazing. It's really impressive to watch. They're just like everywhere at once. Yeah. Also, because Venus is ruling the third house cusp, trading places with Mars, so gaining dignity there. So that, that's also the skills of the hands. Right. Boxers need that Gemini third house influence because of the arms. It's very strong for them. Fifth house, also the house of entertainment, fun and games, children. You get a bunch of kids. Jupiter in the fifth. Draconic, but still. And then we're getting Pluto, Chiron, ascendant in the seventh. Ascendant's moving into the eighth, but still in the seventh quadrant. And seventh house, relationship with others, open enemies. Yeah, like I said before, very prominent for opponents. Opposition in general. His nodes are pretty much reversed here. North node in the eighth house. Although ninth house cusp is Aries, so again, religion, eighth moving into ninth. Neptune is in the ninth. So spirituality, because Neptune is about creativity, but also spirituality in the ninth. So we're getting a lot of that for Muhammad Ali, the ninth house influence. South node is pretty much, the Draconic south node is pretty much conjunct Neptune, natal Neptune. Again, creative spirituality, creativity, spirituality. So, yeah. Obviously the natal is primarily what we want to look at, but we just get confirmation when we look at the Draconic chart, because you can't make this stuff up. Like, not everyone's going around calling themselves the greatest, right? And his Draconic sun is in Leo, conjunct his Leo ascendant. I mean, talk about ego personified. Not only that, Moon and Mercury, both in Leo in the first house. Mercury gains directional strength in the first house. So his speaking, his communication, his spoken word. He made after he was a boxer, he made these albums that were spoken word that people considered the first rap. So that's very prominent. You cannot deny the relevance of the Draconic Chart. Every time I pull it up, I'm like, wow, this really explains things so much more. So that is Muhammad Ali. Yeah. All right. I think that pretty much explains it, and done for there. Don't forget to hit like button, please. Share this, subscribe if you haven't already, or get your friends to subscribe, and book a reading with me. Go to my website, macroastrology.com, or hit me up on my email, macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com, and leave a comment. Tell me who you'd like me to read, or if you want to say something about this video, go for it. Yeah, and I'll see you soon. All right, thanks, bye.